We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Tesamad Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 19a. The Gemara continues a story with Rava Bar Bar Chana. Rava Bar Bar Chana Irches Legita Be Midrasha. He lost a get in the Beis Medrash. Rashi explains, Irches Legita Shaya Shliach Lahavi. He was a shliach to deliver a get. The Irches Le Vashkachu. He forgot it in the Beis Medrash, and so now he wanted to retrieve the get. Amar, so Rava Bar Bar Chana, he said, Isimona Isli Begavia. If you want a simon, I have a simon. I can identify the get through a simon. And Itvius Eino Isli Begavia. If you want me to recognize the get, I'm also able to recognize it. And so the Gemara says, Hadru Nihili. The Gemara said, based on this, they returned it to him. And Amar, he said, Lo Yadana, I don't know, Imishum Simona Hadru Nihili. Did they return it to me because I had a simon? Because Savri Simon and Dorais, and they hold that Simonim are considered Dorais, so that's enough to return a get. Imishum Tvias Eino, or maybe the reason why is because of the fact that I recognized it. Ahadru and Nihili, that's why they returned it to me. V'daf got sorvim midrabanan, and they only returned it to me because I was a Talmud Chacham. Avol inish dial malo, but if I would have just been a regular person, they would not have relied on Tvias Ayin, so that he wasn't sure about whether they were returning it because of the Siman or because of the Tvias Ayin. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we said above, Matzah get Isha B'shuk, if somebody finds a divorce document in the marketplace, Bizman Shabal Moda Yachzer Isha, so if the husband admits, so then you return it to the wife. Ein habal moda, but if the husband does not admit, lo yachzer lo lazev lo lazeh, you should not return the divorce document to either party. And the Gemara says, Bizman shabal moda miya yachzer lisha. Now, if the husband does admit, so then we do return to the wife. And so the Gemara says there should be a different concern. And the Gemara explains, why aren't we concerned that maybe he wrote it and his intention was to give it in Nisan, but he did not actually give it until Tishrei? And then the husband went ahead and he sold the fruits. This is talking about the fruits of the Nichse Mulug that he is entitled to as long as he's married to the wife. He sold those fruits from Nisan until Tishrei. And then what's going to happen is she's going to take out this get, and the get is going to be dated from Nisan. She'll be able to collect from the lakuchos, and it's going to be unjust. She's essentially going to argue that she was divorced in Nisan because that's the date on the get, and in reality the divorce was not until Tishrei. Why aren't we concerned with such an eventuality? And the Gemara says, now according to the one who says that the moment the husband decides that he's going to divorce her, he's no longer entitled to the fruits of the Nichse Milug, then it works out fine, because if he wrote that get, meaning to say he wrote it in Nisan, so that's already Nasan Ein of Lagarsha. He's already intended to divorce her by Nisan. So then actually he's not entitled to the fruits of the Nichse Milug, and then it actually is okay for the wife to take out the get and say that anything that was sold from Nisan is really mine. But according to the one who says that the husband is entitled to the fruits of the Nichse Milug until the time that the get is actually given, so what are you going to say in that situation? Now you really should have a concern according to that Manda Amar. This get is going to be given to the wife and she'll be able to take away the fruits from the lakuchos, and that's going to be shelo kedin, that's going to be unjust. And the Gemara says to that, Kiasya lemitraf amrinan law, when he comes to collect, so we say to her, meaning when she comes to collect the fruits from the lakuchos, they're able to say to her, I see raya, you have to bring a proof. When did you actually receive the get? In other words, it's not really a concern, because even if we're going to give the get isha, even if we're going to give the divorce document to this woman, and she's going to try to collect from the lakuchos, and really she's not allowed to collect from the lakuchos, because she only received the get in Tishrei, not in Nisan, but it's not going to be a problem. The lakuchos will simply say, prove to us when you actually receive the get, and by saying that, they'll be able to avoid having to pay in an unjust fashion. But the Gemara continues, but why is that different than situations of just a regular document that's used for a debt where we do have such a concern? Because we learned in the Mishnah, it says again, if a person finds a shtar chov, that's a document that's to collect a debt. So if it has achrayis nechasim, meaning the ability to collect from property with a lien, the ability to collect from property that's in the hands of the lakuchos, you shouldn't return such a document. Then when we explain that Mishnah, we establish the Mishnah is talking about a case where the lova actually admits that he's chayiv the money, and so therefore why aren't you just returning it to the malva if the lova admits that he's chayiv? And we said that maybe they're in cahoots with each other because umishum shemakasav lelavos benisan v'lolava atishrei. Maybe what happened was that it was written that the loan should be in Nisan, but the loan didn't actually take place until Tishrei. The kataraf lakuchos shelo kedin, and the point over here is to return it to the malva, so they'll be able to collect from lakuchos shelo kedin. The malva will now say, I'm entitled to collect the debt that's owed to me, property, and I'm entitled to collect all the way from Nisan, when really he's not entitled to collect until Tishrei, because the loan didn't take place until Tishrei. So again, we have this concern, but why are we concerned? We're not concerned by the case of the Nichsei Mulug, because we say the Lekuchos will say, prove to us when you actually received the divorce document. We should say the same thing over here. Hasam Nami over there also, Lahada, you should just return the document to the Malva. V'chiyasi l'mitrav, when he comes to the Lekuchos to collect the property, Neimolei, they'll just say to him, I see Rai, you have to bring a proof. Eimas mata shtarchov liyadach, when did you actually receive the shtarchov? It's not enough just to see the date on the shtarchov. We want to know exactly when the loan took place. Why don't we say the same thing we said by Gerisha, we should say by shtarchov? And the Gemara says, Amri, they answer to this that there's a distinction between Gerisha and Shtarchov as follows. Hach over here, Gabe Gerisha, when it comes to a Gerisha, Asi Lokeach Vitava. So what's going to happen is that the Lokeach is going to come and claim, Amar Haida Hadrua Nihila Rabbanan Lagita, because he's going to say to himself, the reason why the Rabbanan gave her the get is Mishum de Lota'agin Vitesa, because they don't want that she should be an Aguna. She needs to have her divorce document. And so Hashda de Koasi Lamitraf Tezel Vitesi Raya, Eimas Mota Gita Liyada. But now that she wants to come and collect, now that you want to actually collect my property, meaning this is the Lokeach talking, so you have to go, meaning the wife has to go ahead and bring a proof. When exactly did you receive the get? When she received the get, that's when she's really entitled. In other words, the person, the Lokeach, is going to understand, I understand why the Bezin gave her the get. She needs to prove she's divorced. That doesn't necessarily mean she's entitled to take my property, and so therefore he'll know to say, you have to prove when did you receive the get. But over here, Gabe Shtarchov, when it comes to a Shtarchov, because there the Lokeach is not going to be able to make the claim. He's not going to realize that he has a claim. Because he's going to think, from the fact that the Rabbanan gave to the Malva the Shtarchov, they gave the Malva the Shtarchov. Why did they give him the Shtarchov? It's obvious. Why would they give him the Shtarchov? Lemitravu, it's in order to collect. So in other words, he just assumes the Bezin must have investigated this, and they know that he's able to collect from the date on the Shtar. So it seems to be that the Rabbanan actually investigated the matter, and he actually did get the get before I actually purchased the property. He's going to just think that he has no claim. He's not going to know to make the claim. That's why by the Shtarchov we don't return it, whereas by the Gerisha we do. And Rashi explains, V'lo nasan on Tishrei, again we should be concerned, maybe the get was written in Nisan, but it wasn't given until Tishrei. V'chol zman shelo nasan, and as long as it wasn't given, Haya lo lechol v'limchor peirei nichsem belug shelo, so then he's allowed, while he's married to her, he's allowed to eat and sell the fruits of the nichsei melug. Again, the nichsei melug is the property that the wife brings into the marriage. She owns the property, but he's allowed to use the peiros. Shatiknu chachamim lebal lechol peiros shel nichsei melug ishto, shenaflu lo liyerusha, that again, the chachamim instituted that the husband is allowed to eat the fruits of the nichsei melug of his wife that she brought into the marriage. Let's say she inherited that property. And then the Gemara said, Shapir, it's good according to the one who says that from the moment he sets his eyes to divorce her, already from that point in time, he's no longer entitled to the nichsei melug. So then Shapir, so then it makes sense. Yesh lo litraf, then she is allowed to collect from the lekuchos, because the fruits did not belong to the husband. He had already written the get. Kol masha mocher mishas ksiva. She's allowed to collect anything that he sold from the moment that the get was written. But again, the Gemara said, if you're following the other Manda Omar, that he only loses the fruits of the nichsei melug when he actually gives the divorce document, so then she's really not entitled to collect. How can you give her this get? And so then the Gemara said, no, the lekuchos realized that they can tell her, they can say to the Bezin, she needs to prove when she actually received the get. Eimas mata gita liyadach, when did you actually receive the get? Miad balech, from your husband. Eimas mata shtar liyadach, miad halo v'tchila. So then the Gemara said, well, why don't the lekuchos realize the same thing when it comes to the loan document? And so then the Gemara said, Asa lokech v'tava yasi l'mitraf masek adaite l'tvoa. I see raya eimas mata gita liyadach bizman hakama. When it comes to the wife coming, she's trying to collect the peiros of the nichsei melug from the lekuchos. So over there already the lokeach realizes, I have a claim over here. You have to prove when you receive the divorce document, because he understands the reason she was given the document was not to collect the peiros of the nichsei melug, it was in order to prove that she's divorced. However, when it comes to the situation of a shtarchov, there the lekuchos don't realize, they think it's been investigated by the Bezin, and the Bezin already determined mekame didi that this happened before, the loan essentially happened before I actually bought the property, mikodem shamachar li halov nechasav, before the lov actually sold me his property, mata shtar miad lova lamalva, the shtar already went from the hands of the lova to the malva, but he showed that was a first, and he thinks that the Bezin already determined that this malva is allowed to take away his property. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said, Shechrui avodim v'chulu. If somebody finds a document that sets an Eved free, he should not return it. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Motza shtar shechur b'shuk. If somebody finds a shtar shechur in the marketplace, bizman sheharav moda yachzer le'eved. If the master admits that he gave it to the Eved, essentially that the Eved is free, so then you return the document to the Eved. Ein harav moda. But if the master does not admit lo yachzer lo lezev lo lezeh, it should not be returned to either party. Bizman sharav moda miya yachzer le'eved. So the Gemara says, in a situation where the master admits, nevertheless you do actually return it to the Eved. And so the Gemara says again, we should have a similar concern as we mentioned above. V'amai, why is it that you return such a document to the Eved? Nechashem akasav litein lo b'nisan. We should be concerned, maybe it was written to give in Nisan. V'lo nasan lo at Tishrei, but he didn't actually give the document to the Eved until Tishrei. V'yazal avdo v'konen nechasin mi Nisan v'at Tishrei. The Eved went ahead and he bought property from Nisan until Tishrei. Now again, he wasn't actually free until Tishrei. V'yazal harav is zavninu, and then the master goes ahead and he sells that property, because really it's the master's property, it's not the slave's property. He didn't go free yet. Umapik leila shechur, but now that you've returned this document to the Eved will be able to take out this shtar shechur, techasa b'nisan, because it's written in Nisan, so he'll be able to claim that it really was his property, it wasn't the master's property. V'kataraf lekuchos shelo kedin, then he'll be able to use this document to collect from lekuchos, to collect from the purchasers, and it's going to be unjust. We should have such a concern. And the Gemara says, now it works out, according to the one who says that it's considered to be a benefit for the Eved to go free. And then we'll also follow Abaya that say that the moment the Edom sign, since it is considered totally to the slave's benefit to go free, the moment that the Edom actually sign, that's when he's entitled to the property. So then Shaper, so then it's fine, because really the property does in fact belong to the Eved from the point in time that the Edom sign. But according to the one who says that it's considered not to be a total benefit for the slave to go free, there is some detriment, there's some downside, so to speak, for the slave when he goes free from his master. So then he only really is entitled to the property when he receives the shtar shechur. So what are we going to say in that situation? Again, you're going to have a problem that if you return this shtar shechur to the Eved, he's going to be able to take away from lekuchos, it's going to be unjust. And the Gemara says to that, it's not a problem. The chiyasi l'mitraf, similar to what we said above, to chiyasi l'mitraf, if he does come to try to collect from the lekuchos, amrin on, so then they'll say to him, the lekuchos will say to the Eved, I see raya emas mata shechur liyadach. You have to bring a proof from what point in time, or at what point in time, the shtar shechur came to your hands. And Rashi explains, Hanichol Mandomar Pluksa Parakama de Gittin. Again, it's a machlokus in the first parak of Gittin in terms of whether it's a zechus or a chov for the Eved to go free. And Rashi continues, Zechusu Levet, again, it's considered a merit for the Eved. Tovahi Etzel, it's good for him. Shematiro Bekal, now he's allowed to marry into the community. And according to that understanding, V'kevan Deschusu, since it is considered a merit, Ikal Etrutze de Mishosh and Nichtav, so then you could already say that from the moment the shtar is actually written, Zocha B'Shichur, he already gets a zechus as going free. Rashi understands that the moment the shtar actually reaches his hand, so then he becomes retroactively a free person from the time that it was actually signed. However, if you say chovu levet, if you say it's detrimental, chovasu sheyotze mitachas rabo, it's considered a detriment for the Eved to leave his master. Kolomar hefsedu lo, meaning to say it's like a loss for him. Shem Eved Kohenu, for example, let's say he's an Eved and he's the slave of a Kohen. Post Leminat Truma. Now that he goes free, he can't have Truma anymore. V'im Shel Yisrael. Let's say he's the Eved of a Yisrael. Osro b'shifcha kananis. He's no longer allowed to marry a shifcha kananis. Dezilale or shlichale or pritzale. Maybe there are certain reasons that he prefers a shifcha kananis. So again, in that situation, if it's a chov, it's not going to be retroactive. So then you have this problem. Ma'ikol amemer. What are we going to say? The hashto lekol amemer eda b'chasumov chavin lo dein chavin lo adam shlo b'fanav. You can't say eda b'chasumov. You can only say eda b'chasumov zachin lo. You can't say eda b'chasumov chavin lo. You can't say that through their signatures they do something detrimental. What are we going to say to that? And again, the Gemara answered that the lekuchos will simply say, prove to us when you actually receive the shtar shechror. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Daitiki matana v'chulu. If somebody finds documents, Daitiki is like a will. Matana is a document that's made to give a gift. You find all of these. Also, they should not be returned. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Ezuhi Daitiki. What is a Daitiki? What it means is as follows. Datei lemekam v'lios shemeis nechasav leploni. Basically, it says, this document is to say that if so-and-so dies, so then his property goes to so-and-so. The idea essentially is that this document is a will. And matana, what's considered a matana? matana, that's a document of a gift. Kol shekasa bo mehayom ulachar misa. If it says from today, after death, then it's considered to be like a gift that the person is giving upon his death. The Gemara now says, Alma, we see, Ksiva mehayom ulachar misa hu dekani, v'lo lo kani. Are we saying the only way to give a gift is to say mehayom ulachar misa, to give it from today, should it be that the person dies, or when the person dies, you can't have any other kind of gift that's an acquisition? Amar Abaye says, no, that's what it means. That's not what it means. What it means rather is as follows. Hachi kamar, this is what it's saying. Ezuhi matnas bori shehi kematnas shchimera. When do we consider the matana of a healthy person to be the equivalent of a matana of somebody on his deathbed? The lo kani el lachar misa, where we say that the kinyan only takes place after death. Kol shekasaba mehayom uliachar misa. Then you have to have the phrase in there of mehayom uliachar misa, and then it's essentially the same as in matnas shchimera. And the Gemara says, "Time of Delomar Tanu." Now, the reason why in the Mishnah you're not supposed to return these various documents, the daitaki, the matana, is because the person didn't say you should give it to the recipient. Ha'amar Tanu. But if the person who made the document said to give it to the recipient, no, so then we would give these to the recipient. And so the Gemara says to that, or a minute, we have the following contradiction. It says, "Motza daitakos, apotikos, umatanos." If a person finds daitaki, again, that's a will. Apotikos refers to when a person designates a particular field as a payment for a certain loan or a document of a matanos, afal pisha shneihem modim. So here it says, even though they both admit, lo yachzer lo lazeh velo lazeh, it should not be returned to either party. So how come over here it says they should not be returned to either party? And again, in our Mishnah, the inference from our Mishnah is it should be returned. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Abba bar Mamel, Rabbi Abba bar Mamel says, lo kasha, it's not difficult. And Rashi explains, "Dot tehei lemekam," that's referring again to the daitaki. Shtar zeh, this document, yelokum v'lios, it should be upheld, b'chol hakasabo, everything that's written in it, the divrei shchiv meira kechsuvin v'chimesurin damu. The point is that the words of a shchiv meira, someone on his deathbed, is as if it's written and given over. That's what's talking about a daitaki. And then matana, by a gift, that's a matanas bari. That's when a healthy person is giving over a gift, like a will. Ezuhi kol shekasabo v'chulu, it has to be written mehayom ulachar misa. What is this language of hayom ulachar misa? Rashi explains it means gufa karka kanoi lo min hayom, means the actual land he gets from today. V'ein lo od rishus lemochra v'litno lo risha v'aperos ein ochel, but he can't do anything with the land. He can't sell it, give it, bequeath it. He can't use any of the fruits. Kol yemei chayev, he can't use it the whole time while the person is alive. El lachar misa, he can only essentially use the land after the person's death. And the Gemara then said, "V'lo lo kani," it has to say mehayom ulachar misa. Otherwise, there's no kinyan. Bitmiya, the Gemara is asking like a question. Kol shekein dem yoyv le gufu peros me'achshav dekani tvei. If a person gives a matana and says you can have the land and have everything in the land, that's even more of a kinyan. What does it mean mehayom ulachar misa? And so the Gemara said, no, mehayom ulachar misa means to say that then it's like a matnas bari, which is like a matnas shchimera. As Rashi says, "Stam matnas shchimera lo kanya lo ela liachar misa." If you have a matana given by someone on his deathbed, so the acquisition obviously is after the person dies. The machmas misa hu mitzav. The whole point is that he's giving it to the person as his will after he dies. And how do you do that? How do you construct a shtar in that fashion? If the person is healthy, you use the language of mehayom ulachar misa. And then the Gemara said, Ho'amar Tanu Nosen, the implication is that in all of these cases, with all of these documents, if the person says, give it to the recipient, we do give it. Amas Nisan Parach the Tali Taima B'Shani Omer Nimlach Aleim Shalom Litanon. What's happening over here is we're really asking on the Mishnah, because the Mishnah said the only reason why we don't give the documents is because maybe the person decided, he wrote the document, but then he decided not to give it. And so therefore we're saying it sounds like if the person says that you should give it, then we do give the document. And the Gemara asked on that from the Brisa, which seemed to say that we don't give the document back even if both parties actually admit, both parties say that it should be returned, we don't return it to either party. One of the documents listed in the Brisa was aputikos, which means sha'asa lo sada apotiki. It means that he designated this particular field should be for the repayment of the loan. Lemil val pesha isolo olav milvi yashana. There was an old loan, let's say it was an oral loan, and they designated an apotiki. Again, it said, if you find all of these kind of documents, even though both parties admit, you don't return it to either party. As the Brisa said, lo yachzer, you don't return it. Shemakosva lazev velo masar lo. Maybe what happened was he wrote it and he didn't actually give it. Velo zacha bekarka, he didn't actually take possession of the land. The chazer v'chasav la'achar, and then really he wrote for somebody else the property. Umasar lo ashtar, and he gave him the document. V'zacha bo, and now the second person he took the property. Ubal lachzer bo menasheni, and now the person who gave the land wants to actually retract from what he gave to the second person. V'rotza lasas l'rishon, he wants to change his mind and give it instead to the first person. person. So therefore, maybe they're essentially in cahoots. He says, yeah, I want you to give him the shtar. I admit you should give it to this first person in Bezdin. It'll come out that the shtar the first person, so to speak, is holding, his date is earlier than the person who is the true recipient. And then he'll be able to take it away from the second person, and he'll be able to do that in court because he has a document with an earlier date. And that's why it says in this brisa, even if both parties admit, you can't give it to the recipient because we're afraid they're in cahoots. They're trying to take it away from the true recipient of the property. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Tes Amud Beis.